Hello, Mike Demasi here. I just wanted to briefly tell you guys about my new intense color set coming out here. Created this new color palette set basically to coincide with the portrait set that we previously did, which was obviously years ago. Um, got a lot of great feedback from the older set, and it's still a pretty sweet, solid set. I love using it. I use it every day actually. But I wanted to create something a little bit different. A lot of the feedback we got from um, the first color portrait set was it was intended to use almost like an oil mixing palette where you could intermix all the other colors to get every shade that you need. By doing so, 19 colors will turn into 40 colors into 60 colors, so on and so forth. So the previous set, if you weren't familiar with the oil painting process, it could get a little bit confusing. So we wanted to break it down a little bit more simple, which is why we created the palette set. And the palette set is basically all you really need to do a color portrait. There's everything in there. It's still intermixable. It's intermixable with the other 19 colors, but this one we broke it down a little more simple. I broke it down from dark to light in 3 different shades, matching each shade. So for example, if you were to take, let's say my mousse color, the Demasi color, and a beige color, those 3 colors will go together. So everything you do in threes. If you grab 3 yellows, you're going to use 3 tones in yellow. So you're going to grab 3 of the red tones, you'll grab 3 red tones, 3 yellow, so on and so forth. Also threw in a few other colors, like the lilac, which is a purple. Mainly threw the purple in there because if you look at people's base tones and textures, there's a lot of different hues in there. Definitely purples, there's greens, there's blues. But we have greens in the previous set. So I wanted to make sure we got some purple in there this time. And this purple, it's basically used more so as a like a varnish. If you're varnishing a painting, it's the finishing touches that go over everything that you've already saturated. So we'll touch bases on all these colors here in a second. Let me just kind of walk you through what I'm doing in the video currently. Starting this piece here, and I'm going to be using a 7 round, a 9 round, a 13 mag shader curved, a 17 mag shader curved as well. And right now I kind of changed up my entire approach to tattooing. Before I used to do pieces much like a copy machine, from start to finish, bottom to top, just finishing as I go. Well, as the years gone by, it was a great technique. I loved doing it that way. But I also realized sometimes these things take multiple sessions. So to knock it out like that was pretty brutal on a lot of the clients. So this way, I just started mapping it in. And then I'll go back through it later. So right now what I'm doing is I'm taking my 7 round and I'll go through the entire piece with my 7 round, shading everything, going back and forth just with the liner. As you can kind of see, I'm whipping through everything relatively fast. Just taking the liner and creating shades, shapes, and different values. The main point of doing it this way is basically I'm just going to start mapping in and blocking in shadows and also creating shapes and the direction that the tattoo is going to go in. So the reason I started doing this was it's a lot easier, honestly. It's a lot easier and it's a little more pleasing to the client. It doesn't hurt as bad, and you could relatively get stuff laid out pretty quick, and you can see the direction of the tattoo. Like right here, I'm just whipping through the hair really fast with my liner, building up shades, shapes, and values. It's actually really simple. A lot of people kind of trip out, like you're using a liner for all that. Yeah, definitely using a liner. It's a tool a lot of people don't use as effectively, but I love it. I mean, sometimes I just want to do the whole thing with a liner, but obviously that's it's a little unrealistic. But yeah, basically I'll map the whole thing in with a round. Right now I'll map it in with like a base tone or a black. So sometimes I'll do a black and gray under shading under my entire piece, but light enough that I could put color right over the top of it. This particular piece, I used a darker base tone. I grabbed my Mars color from the new set and basically just ran through the entire tattoo with that one tone. I'll dilute it a little bit with the color mixing solution from Intense, and basically kind of do it like I'm doing a black and gray piece, and just slowly start building it up. That way I can see where everything is gonna go. And another, like you can see in this picture right here, it's basically, like I said, like you're sketching it in there. I'm just going around, sketching all the ink where it's gonna go, taking the guesswork out of it. And doing it this way makes it a lot more pleasing on the client, because if they could sit here, I call it an elaborate outline. If they could sit here for the outline elaborately, then they come back and do the next session, and it's not as traumatizing to the skin. I mean, yes, a lot of people want to try to knock out some stuff in one session, but realistically, you know, most people could sit 4 or 5 hours and then they're pretty much done. This particular piece, I think I worked on it a little over 6 hours, but for the most part, we got 90% of it done. We might go and do one more session and just saturate things a little bit more, detail it out. But here, I'm all done with my mapping it in and outlining, and I'm just going to go through and start putting all my darker colors in there. Kind of working from the background to the foreground, so putting my darker tones, which right now I'm using black, usually Formula 23 black actually. Just go through and start building up. I'm taking my 13 mag and just going over everything I just did. It's important to know when you're building up like this, you kind of go at the same consistent hand speed. If you're going slow or packing stuff in, you're going to cause chewing up the skin a little bit easier. Here, I'm moving my hand speed relatively same the whole way through, and I'm able to build up the color a lot easier. So right now, you can see I'm taking color, and I'm just re-putting it over the stuff I already did. I'm taking that Mars color again, that I already used, and taking my 17 mag and just starting to build it up. The more I build it up, the easier it gets. So I'm basically treating it like a black and gray piece. It's just with color. So here I'm only using Mars. I haven't used any other color yet. And doing it this way, I'm actually creating a lot of different values with just one color. And also those undertones. So right now I'm building up the face, building it up again with just that Mars tone. Just going through it. In the face, her hues are just a little bit different. So I have Mars and Moose, and I'm dipping back and forth in between those two colors. And like you can see right now, I'm just shaping everything out. Not really focusing on what it looks like. I'm just focusing on each shape and shadow. And starting to saturate a little bit more. But as you can see, I know the video is sped up, but as you can see, I'm actually moving relatively fast. Finish mapping the face in. go through, start adding a little bit more darks. At this point, I'll actually start mixing some of my black, my Mars, and a moose color together, giving me another darker color. Just start laying it out. Now I'm just building it up even more. I'm taking my black and my moose, mixing the two, mixing the Mars, and just using those two colors, three colors, for mixing and creating more depth in the piece. As you can see, I kind of started looking real close. I might have mixed some of the lilac in there now too. Just building it up. And you could do this relatively quick, just building it up, building it up, building it up. And it'll start to take shape over time. In comparison to how I used to do it, it was like I wanted to see the end results right away. I couldn't be more excited to get to the end and start putting highlights in, because that was the funnest part. But this way, it's a little easier on the clients. And if for some reason they needed to stop and they were hurting and they couldn't continue, I got everything laid out, I got everything mapped in, and it already looks like a cool tattoo. So they leave, you know, feeling like they accomplished something and it wasn't just a bunch of lines, or, you know, I finished just her chest and then come back and I'll put her head on later. You know, somebody has to walk around with 6 months with a headless woman. I mean, I've done it before, but, you know, it's kind of hard to tell the client, you know, they gotta walk around with a headless piece for a while. So right now, in this video, I'm starting to build it up even more. I'm starting to use my smoothie color, some pumpkin, some tea, also some nude, which is a really awesome color just for mixing. And it also, you can just put it straight in there and it's not going to be a big deal. It goes in really smooth. So here I am just building up the color and saturating it a lot more. Keep in mind I'm mixing through all the colors I previously talked about. The Mars, the moose, and the black. Now I'm intermixing them all together. So now I'm dipping into the nude, from the moose into the nude, and I'm creating another value. And I'm just kind of randomly putting it where it needs to go. Kind of all over the place. I'm building it up like a painting. So now you can see like my skin tones are starting to change, starting to take shape a little bit more. Constantly just building it up with my 17 mag. Just working my way through the face, back and forth. Trying to put the same colors in every area of the tattoo. I'm kind of a stickler about that. If you're familiar with some of my work, it's what I do. So like if you see purple in the very bottom of the piece, you'll see purple throughout the entire tattoo. It's a rule of thirds is what I call it, and it's more appealing to the eye. So if I make the eyes, let's just say green for example, you're also going to see green throughout that entire tattoo. If I only put green just in the eyes and nowhere else, it's just going to stand out way too much. So here I am now using my goldfish color mixed in with the nude and just slowly building it up. Now I'm doing the same technique that we talked about earlier. I'm just building up the lips with that round, taking my Mars color and my black and just building up the lips. And by doing it this way, it's easy to see it take shape right away. You're kind of taking the guesswork out of the piece. And I'll slowly start building up the Mars some more, mixing Mars and smoothie together also with the nude, and it's going to create almost like a nice little red color here. I'm doing the same thing for the band-aids on her face. Alright, here I am building the color up a little bit more. like we talked about. The hair, building that up with some Mars. I did use some reds in there, and now I'm taking some more of my lighter flesh tones. The beige and also sadie cheeks, mixing those colors together and saturating the face a little bit more. And you see now that I'm putting these lighter tones in there, it's all starting to make a little more sense. Now I'm grabbing the lilac and starting to put it in the highlighted areas. I have some periwinkle out. I'm mixing periwinkle and lilac together to get this really nice shade of blue. Now I'm kind of putting some white highlights in here and there. I'm kind of putting them in really, really rough. Just kind of sculpting the lines in again with my liner. But now I'm just doing it with white. And I basically do this just to put one layer down. That way I could go right back over it and it'll be a lot more solid. I'm actually using one of the newer colors from my set. It's called Yeti. It's white, but it has a very, very solid blue base, which actually makes the white appear brighter. And it's also great for mixing in with my other tones. As you see here, I'm just kind of sculpting in the white back and forth, back and forth. Taking my 17 mag and just really roughing it all in there. Yeah, so right here I'm still just putting the white back in there. Like I was saying, using the Yeti is a great blending color. As you can see here, I'm going over a lot of the stuff that I already previously laid down. Kind of mixing right over the top of the tones that I previously laid. So like the beige and the base and the Mars, all the colors that I put underneath there are gonna act, how do you explain it? Act like a foundation for the lighter colors that I'm putting over the top. So by doing it this way, it's going to be a more solid transition from color to color and just blend everything in smoothly. Kind of like if you're familiar with like a color pencil drawing, a lot of times people will use like a colorless blender and whatnot to smooth everything out. Well, it's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm taking these lighter tones and I'm just smoothing everything out. The more I go over it, the smoother it becomes. The more saturated it becomes. Right here you can see I have a paper towel over the top of her face, and what that does, I soaked it with Intense Cleanse. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with it, but a lot of times I'll soak it with some cleanse, lay it on the face, and it just pulls the color right out. You can see right now like her face is looking pretty solid. There's not a lot of irritation or redness around it, and I have a lot of those lighter colors in there. And that's basically because of the cleanse. It calms the skin down so fast that I'm able to see what I need to put in there because it's less irritated. So I'll often do that throughout the tattoo. I also use it through the entire tattoo, kind of like in replace of my green soap. I'll use the foamer, or I will dip it into a rinse cup with a paper towel full of cleanse and just start using it that way. And here you can see I'm using some of the blacks and the darker tones. I'm just going over the same stuff I already did. I'm just saturating it more. A lot of people are afraid to put darker colors, over the lighter tones that we already did. You can see I have white all over her face, and now I'm using black. Now I'm using red in the hair. And they're darker tones, and they're really not going to intermix as long as you're wiping away from it. And if there's not a lot of trauma to the skin, it's not going to get stuck in there. And I think that's a huge myth. Now I'm taking my orange colors and starting to put a lot of the orange bases in there. And you can kind of see I'll take the orange, and like I was telling you earlier, I kind of just spread it through the entire tattoo, um, creating that rule of thirds. If you were to separate the piece into 3 pieces, into thirds, there'll be a color from every part of that palette in each one of those. You get a good visual of it now. You kind of see like her face now kind of has an orange hue and orange tone to it. That's because I went through there and started putting some of that goldfish color in there and just blending over the top of it very lightly. Like just tinting the tattoo. Now I'm working on the top of the ears here, and I'm taking my black and just pretty much mixing it with whatever browns I have down there. And at this point, a lot of the colors are mixed up so much that I'm getting a nice brown tone just from intermixing all the colors together. So there's no real, I poured this brown out of the bottle and this is what I'm using. It's basically, I created a brown from the colors that I muddied up. And it just looked cool, so I was like, I gotta use this. Here I'm using some platinum. And just building up the ears. The same technique. You see I'm just slowly building it up, going back and forth. Not doing it like super circled or saturating, like just packing it in slowly. I'm basically just roughing it in there as fast as I can. Just getting some tones down. And then my next tone will just go right over the top, just saturating it. And it'll start to smooth out and come together. Using some of the beige and the lighter flesh tones and sculpting them in. But this was the main reason for the ink set, was basically you could break it down. You could do a portrait with 3 base tones, 3 tones for everything. I mean, break it down as simple as possible. Reds, use 3 different shades of red. Green, use 3 different shades of green. Also, the same thing with flesh tones. If you're going to use 3 browns, 3 shades of brown. 3 beige, 3 shades of beige. And you kind of just intermix them going back and forth. It makes the work a lot easier and a lot more fluid. And you take a lot of the guesswork out of it. That was why the whole ink set was created. Like, how could we make our jobs a little more simple? Well, let's just break it down even easier. It's the same thing with these gray tones. If you wanted to do like a solid, the color gray piece, replacing black and gray, you would use three grays. You know. Here we go. I'm just slowly building up the ears, starting to take shape. Just grabbing one color and just keep building it up, keep building it up. The more you build it up, the more saturated it becomes. I get that question a lot. How did you get it so saturated? Why does it look so saturated? How did you build that up like that? And it's really, I'm not packing the color in at all. I'm just treating it like a black and gray piece. You know, black and gray, you build it up until you get it where you want it to be, and then you're done. I'm pretty much doing the same thing, I'm just doing it with color. So you can see here, the lighter colors, I'm just going straight over it. If I want it to be blended in a little bit more, I could just go right over those darker blacks and browns and start fading it out. Now I'm shaping the goggles using the same technique, but as I'm working on these goggles, you could take a look at like the bottom half of the tattoo. You can see her face. At this point, the face is pretty much done, until the next session, of course. Here I am putting the white in the goggles, packing it in there with a liner again, just going really quick, and then I'll move on to the next side, pack that in, let the skin calm down, and then I'll go back over it again with more white. And that's how you get the white to stay looking white. I don't ever try to pack in white. It doesn't ever work. You know, it gets all muddy, it gets all bloody, and you really can't see what you're doing anymore. So by doing it this way, you can see I'm putting white in the eyes and in her underbrow. I'm just doing it all with a liner and I'm going really fast, but that white is sticking really well to every piece of her face because the skin is open and it's ready to receive it. So I couldn't put this white in there the way I'm doing now if I didn't have all the other tones in there and all the other pigments laid down. White, I believe, responds best once the skin is already almost to full saturation. You know, if you use it as a blending tool, it works great. If you use it as a highlight tool, it works great. You know, but if you use it just as a solid packing it in, and it's one of those things that you're never going to be 100% happy with. So here's this session of the tattoo. That's pretty much it. We'll do one more session, clean things up a bit, saturate it just a bit more. But that's basically the first session of a tattoo. It could be done. It looks cool just the way it is. My client's happy with it. But us as tattooers, we know nothing's ever done. So getting the client to come back and do one more final session on it, run through it, saturate it a little bit more, and we'll all be happy. Thanks for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed this intense, my new color set, the palette. If you have any questions or comments, just hit me up, let me know, and I'll do anything to help out. Thank you guys.